Okay, I've never heard that before. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Capital Now. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying respect to the fact that we in Philadelphia are located on the lands of the Lenni Lenape people. My name is Layla Cartier. I am the Executive Director of CraftNOW Philadelphia, and we are thrilled to be hosting this new virtual series, Capital Now. We are focusing on capital readiness to provide creative entrepreneurs with working understanding of three forms of funding: grants, crowdfunding, and financing, and provide access to the business readiness required to secure these investments and put them to good use. Last month, we started with the Paycheck Protection Program with help from our friends at the Enterprise Center. And I'd like to let everyone know here tonight that the Enterprise Center supports entrepreneurs of all types, even creative ones, and they are available to help you with business questions free of charge. This program, Capital Now, is part of a new project we are working on with friends in Pittsburgh, thanks to our partnership with the Creative Business Accelerator and the newly formed Keystone Alliance. So please keep in touch with us as your business grows. Let us know how we might be able to help connect you with technical assistance and other opportunities you might need help with. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I wanted to share that we have enabled the closed caption feature tonight, thanks to our friends at Disability Pride PA. So you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen for the auto transcription. It's not perfect, but I hope it's helpful for some. Please do keep yourself on mute to avoid background noise while our presenters are talking. But I do invite you to put questions or comments in the chat so we can filter through them as we go. And at the end of the program, we will invite you all to unmute yourselves and ask questions and participate in a conversation. So the big question on everyone's mind right now is, how can I access grant funding? I am pleased to welcome CERF Plus, Leeway Foundation, and the Velocity Fund here tonight. We are going in reverse alphabetical order, so we will start with Cindy at the Velocity Fund. The Velocity Fund directly supports artists to organize new collaborative projects throughout the city of Philadelphia by awarding grants up to $5,000. So Cindy, please tell us more about what we need to do in advance of your June 14 deadline.
Great. Well, thank you, Layla. It is such a pleasure to be connecting to your community and presenting alongside these other wonderful funding agencies. I'm going to pop over into a small presentation to hide behind my slides. I wanted to start by just backing up a little bit and reiterating some of the introduction that Layla just made so graciously. So we award grants to Philadelphia-based artists here at the Velocity Fund in the amounts of either $2,500 or $5,000. And as Layla mentioned, it is a project-based grant, specifically for Philadelphia artists. And we're looking at a wide range of experimental practices, particularly those that emphasize collaboration or are coming up with new discourses and fresh audience impact. So this banner shows our last 12 grantees from 2020. You can see the sort of range of the types of projects that we fund. We are a re-granting agency, meaning that our funding is coming from the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Arts. We are the Philadelphia-based re-granting initiative through Warhol, and there are numerous other Warhol initiatives in other cities throughout the US, but we're the Philly one. And to back up, we are currently administered by Philadelphia Contemporary, so that's where you'll find us, and we've been around since 2018. The grant is specifically for visual artists, groups of artists, artist-run spaces, to collectives, organized or not. There are some exceptions to who is eligible to apply for this specific funding. So current students in a full-time program are not eligible. Our deadline's coming up June 14th, so that will allow you to apply after graduate. But again, it's not for organizations or profits. It is to give money directly to artists living within the city boundaries of Philadelphia. And since we are a project fund, it is for a work that has a public outcome. So those are the exceptions, and anyone who received a grant this year is eligible for something else and not the Velocity Fund. We invite a panel once we receive the applications of somewhere around 100, 120. They will be reviewed by an independent panel that consists of a Philadelphia-based curator, a Philadelphia-based artist who was a previous grantee, one of our re-granting partners in another city through the Warhol Foundation, and then also a curator or artist somewhere in the US that we think would jive with what we're doing here, and we're really excited about what they're doing in their space. We announce the panelists after the awards are announced, and the other important thing to emphasize is that the Velocity team, we do not make those decisions, we just help facilitate it. So we're really open to be able to help you with the application process and to advocate for you as you're putting that together, because when it comes to decision making, we can be an observer. Our applications are open and they will be due on June 14th this year, and we'll let the grantees, we'll announce that by August of this year. Our applications this year are through Submittable, which is a slight change. Our project fund needs to take place sometime within this year. So it's for a phase or for a project that's new. It's not for something that's just wrapping up. It's something that you're looking to begin in September, and then, or sometime after September and sometime before August. The application process is going to ask you for some contact information and some visual support materials. So when you go to our website, I'll put it in the chat afterwards, you can just click on the apply function and it'll show you this checklist and it'll take you to our submittable page. Once you hit apply now with Submittable, you can sign in with Google or create an account or Facebook, Twitter. You'll go through this eligibility checklist. That's just ensuring that you are in fact eligible before you begin. And then you can start the application process. One thing I like to point out is that we have a new function for invite collaborators that will allow you to work collaboratively with other people if you are working in a team. As the lead applicant, you'll be the person who hits submit if you're the one who started it, but you can work together that way. We'll ask in the application a series of questions, a title, a very short introduction to your project in under 75 words, and then the contact information for the lead applicant. If you're working on a solo project, that would be you. If you're working in a team, just make sure that that person is living in Philadelphia and willing to be our main contact. And then we'll ask you a series of 6 questions. And what we're looking to find out is how, if you define collaboration as part of your process, it's not required, it's encouraged. So this is a chance for you to define how that might look in your project. A brief bio, it's not a full CV. We're looking as a chance to get to know you and your team through a bio. We ask how the visual arts play a role in the proposed project, and that's because we are funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation for the visual arts. So our re-granting partners want to be able to come in. We have a very expansive idea of what visual arts are, and we like to open up this question for our applicants to explain how visual arts do play a role. For many applicants, that's very self-evident, and for other people, it's a good chance to kind of say what the visualizations will be. We have plenty of room for the project proposal. You can have up to 450 words there. We keep all of our answers pretty short. That one is a limit and it's not a suggestion. So as much or as little as you need within that space, please feel free to take it. And we ask who your audience is and how you plan on connecting with them. So that's really a chance for the panel to get to know how you're looking to interact with the city. And then a timeline. So when is this going to unfold? Is it a project that will start, finish, and end within a month? Is it going to take a big chunk of the year? That's just a chance for you to, in the narrative, show what this would look like in action. So that's the bulk of the applications are those short answer questions, but except for full proposal, you have more room there. And then you'll request either $2,500 or $5,000. And it is one or the other. There's no amounts in between. And with that, you'll then show us how you're planning on using that. So if you request $2,500, you'll you'll put that in the budget sheet. And if you need 5,000 for the project, then you'll request that as well. You can download either the PDF or the Excel right on our website or through Submittable. And it looks something like this. This is the most intimidating part of the application. But what we're looking to do is, this is a chance for you to just show us broadly how you would like to spend the money, so that the panelists can look at this and see how it might, again, unroll. The PDF is for you to print out and write in. It's not a smart document, where the Excel you can type in. What we're looking for here is that the expenses are equal what you're asking for. And here, even though we're a project-based grant, all of your funds do not have to go towards materials. There's no limitations there on what you're spending the money for. So if I'm often asked, can artists pay themselves or their contributors? Yes, you absolutely may. And panelists look for that, so that you're making sure that you're valuing your time and your contribution as much as we and the panelists value your time and contribution. Income can be anything from ticket sales to publications, other grants like the ones we're going to hear about tonight that you may be applying for. In-kind donations, you can fill out anything that's going to be donated to you in terms of space, time, energy, materials. And then comments here, anything you need to just explain more, like, oh, we're going to do this if it's safe, or if I don't get this grant, I'm going to do this instead. And I've seen these be very general and very specific. It really depends from project to project. And then we ask for 6 to 12 visual samples. And those can be images, audio, PDF. If it's video or interactive, we're asking for you to use links this year instead, so that we're not having any problems with uploads on either the applicant's end or on the reviewer's end. And in the quick wrap up, I want to remind you that you can see all of our past projects on our website. And there's no real model for what the velocity outside our general mission. What you can see from the past grantees is just the wide range of projects and how they interact with the city of Philadelphia that we have funded. And if during this process you come up with any questions, you can email me. Again, my name is Cindy. I'm the project manager at Velocity Fund. So when you email velocity@philadelphiacontemporary.org, you will reach out to me. And then I've been scheduling a lot of one-on-one applicant support sessions at people's convenience. And also a lot of times we can just hop on the phone and chat, or I can answer your question for email, whatever it takes to help you fill out an application that you're happy with by the June 14th deadline. And I was trying to rush a little bit, but I did forget to mention the important thing, that the application process is and will always be free to the Velocity Fund. So we try to keep the process short, because we also value your time in putting this together, but know that there's no fee associated with applying at all. And then throughout the application process, we're available for feedback beforehand, but then also afterwards, if you receive a grant or do not receive a grant this year, we do offer feedback in order to just keep the conversation going, because the strength of our program is the strength of the artists here in Philadelphia. So we are always happy to be in touch. That is it.
That was really great. So do you have one question? We have a couple, but I think you answered where to find some examples of specific projects. And Melissa said, yes, pay yourself in Collaborators, which is great. And then we have another question. I am an artist and an art teacher at a Philadelphia district school. Recently, we were awarded a project for a design of a mural. Would it be possible to apply for a grant under the name of the artist so that she can actually help paint the mural?
So if the main artist is a Philadelphia-based artist, and this is a project that will begin within our timeframe of September, and if I think what would be important, if the project that's already established, it's important to make sure that you're clear with the panel that the Velocity Fund is allowing you to do this new thing like this. So if awarded the Velocity Fund, we would be able to have the artists come or do a public program or do something in addition to anything that was already sort of set up. What I know that eligibility concerns or panelist concerns sometimes come back in if it feels like the project is already in the works and it's just like an add-on that someone else could or should have already been paying for. But if this is going to allow more student interaction and that is the money is going directly to the artist and not to the school, that is completely eligible. So I would think about framing it in a way that would show what the funding would do in terms of impact in bringing that artist there.
That was great. So that we have a couple more. Can you reconfirm you need the expenses to zero out with the grant amount?
We're looking, I know that the panelists, when they look at that, they're looking for that to zero out. So again, it's not to exact dollars of things, but what they're not looking for is a project that's still would have big holes in funding or projects. And I've also seen, and like if you apply early enough and I catch it, I can send the application back to you, like via email to kind of open it back up. But I've also seen people under asking, so they'll ask for $5,000 and their budget will only add up to $4,800. And so if you're in ahead of time, we can write back and be like, where could you use those expenses? Like, could that $200 go to doing food or gifts for the people who are the participating? Like, where we want you to show us how all of that money is going to be spent. And at the same time, we don't want huge funding gaps, because then what I've seen with the panelists, sometimes they're like, well, if this other thing doesn't come through, how's it going to happen? So if there is that flux, you can do an additional comments like, oh, if we get this extra $20,000 from this other source, then we will do A. And if we don't, then this is our other plan on the download. So
Is the fund open to projects that are aiming to be profitable?
Well, no, that's not it's not for-profit organization. So like as far as a group, like a for-profit group, but if we're looking for, or you're talking about like for a business model that would be for a small group or collective or artist, that's like an incubator to make a profit, to make a living as an artist, then yes, right?
So it is open to
right. So
incubating projects.
So like yes. So I think that's the dance there. But so like if you're looking to establish, yes, profit is not in eligibility.
Okay.
Right.
And then there's
but like I think what you want to I think what I'm getting tripped up is, I think for this grant, the impact is what you want to talk about first and foremost. Like, how are you going to bring that to the community? As if you can find a sustainable way to do that and pay yourself, your collaborators, and the community in doing that, then more power to you. We're super psyched for that.
Perfect. So they had one other question. I'm going to let you look at it in the chat, and I think we're going to go on and start with the next presentation. But before I introduce Melissa, I want to say, to remind everyone on the call, that the City of Philadelphia's Illuminate the Arts grant is also open to individual artists, small and mid-sized nonprofit arts organizations, and small creative enterprises. And the deadline for that is this Friday, May 28th. So I will put the link for that in the chat and introduce now Melissa from Leeway Foundation. So Leeway Foundation's grant-making programs fund women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists and cultural producers living in Greater Philadelphia who engage in art and social change. And there are 2 public-facing opportunities. One deadline just passed, but we're going to let Melissa tell us how to connect with that one next year and the one that's coming up.
Hey, thanks, Layla. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be with you here. It was a sunny day, and then suddenly the sun went away in Mount Airy in Philadelphia, and suddenly it's raining. So bear with me if my connection gets weird and spotty. I'll fully blame Verizon. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. So give me 1 second, and I'll pull it up. Can y'all see that? Great. Thanks for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. As Layla was saying, Leeway Foundation is really centered and focused on funding women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists and cultural producers who are doing work at the intersection of art for social change. This is literally the joy and the hill that we live, breathe, eat, sleep, and do all our work on. Our mission is really to support folks and artists who are on the margins and have been historically underfunded, historically silenced, but have no doubt been working on in the service of movements for social justice. They've been promoting sustainable and healthy communities, and they've been using their art to create change across Philadelphia and beyond. Leeway's funding region isn't just Philadelphia. We also fund in the surrounding counties. And so that's Philadelphia, it's Bucks, it's Camden, Chester, Delaware County, and Montgomery County. And so, I say Philadelphia because I'm a Philadelphian, and, that's who I am, but it is the Philadelphia region. Let me get it right for everyone on this call. We're a trans-affirming organization, which essentially means that anyone whose gender identity or expression is non-conforming and are different from their gender assigned at birth can apply for this grant. And so we just think it's really important to support folks on that spectrum of gender, which we know is a galaxy. In terms of our parallels with what the Velocity Fund is funding, we have some similarities here, right? We provide support directly to individual artists. We do not fund 501c3s, but we do fund collectives. And so perhaps you're part of a collective and you're doing your work collaboratively with a group of other people, and you can absolutely apply for this grant as a collective of folks. We'll just ask that you identify sort of a primary applicant who the fund would run through for that collaboration. We also, similar to the Velocity Fund, have a peer review panel process at Leeway, which means that staff do not decide who receives these grants. And we're really serious about that. We're undeniably biased as staff. One of the ways which Leeway tries to show up, at least staff-wise, for artists in the community is by making ourselves available to talk about applications, provide one-on-one support, put applications together, bounce questions off of it. And we see you at the co-op when you're getting kale, like we see you at performances. And so we bring too much bias into that process as folks who are part of these communities with you. And so we identify a local peer review panel for some of our grants, and then a national peer review panel for another grant that we have, which I'll dig into in a minute. But I just wanted to make that clear. Similar to the Velocity Fund, we're serious about feedback. If you apply for a Leeway grant, no matter if you get it or you don't get it, you're going to receive feedback from us. And that comes in the form of a letter that comes with your notification about whether you received the grant or you didn't. We feel really deeply that feedback is a right. It is not a luxury. And that if you spend your time and your energy putting a grant application together, you should understand what the panelists appreciated about your application and possibly what they had questions or concerns about. And that doesn't mean that they are not going to have any concerns even if they fund you. Folks have concerns or questions about the work, even if they do say yes to it. The beautiful part of applying for a grant is trying to make it as generative as a process as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we are so fiercely committed to feedback. So what do we actually mean by art for social change, right? This is like the buzzword, right? So like when we break that down, what do we mean by it? Essentially, it's just art with a vision and an intentional analysis, right? It could operate in traditional or non-traditional mediums, right? And so Leeway artists look like an amazing range of different disciplines, right? So we fund, traditional visual artists, we fund performance-based folks, we fund musicians, we fund hair braiders, we fund aromatherapists, we fund everything that you can imagine. And we don't try to put boundaries on on the art practice itself, but we give you the space in the application to define what you mean by your art practice and what you see as your social change intent, right? We know that impact can come in a lot of different ways. And these bullets here that you see on your screen aren't a one size, this isn't a checklist for what your project should do. Your project might hit on one or two of these really deeply. So don't look at this list and say, well, it's not doing all of these bullets, right? And it's like, it doesn't have to, right? Social change can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes it looks like banners that go in the protest on the streets. And sometimes it looks like a zine that you create. And sometimes it looks like a performance where you're preserving a piece of culture that's at risk for erosion. But these bullets provide sort of bumpers for how Leeway is taking a look at it, whether it's creating a vision for a more just world, raising consciousness about an issue that folks might not know about, or challenging, racism, classism, transphobia, homophobia, and all the other oppressions that we know exist and intersect in the world today. The other thing I'll mention is we've got 2 public grants open at the moment. And I say that because we're going to roll a third out later this year. So just pay attention around, and I would say sign up for Leeway's e-news or keep your eye peeled to our social media, because in July we'll be announcing a third public program. And I'll give you a taste of what it is today. It will be linking up media-based artists to work with social justice-based organizations to help them reframe, document, or amplify their social justice mission. And so we know that lots of folks, lots of amazing social justice organizations don't have it in the budget to have an artist in residence, and Leeway wants to assist with those organizations with getting an artist in residence, and that will be a $25,000 award. $15,000 will go directly to the artist, and $10,000 will go directly to the social justice organization. That is this is the first time I'm talking about that, on a public call. And so y'all are at the forefront of what's about to pop off at Leeway. In terms of what's open now, we have 2 lines of funding, one called the Art and Change Grant, which is a project-based grant of up to $2,500 to support women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists in Philadelphia to fund art for social change projects. Similar to what Cindy was talking about earlier, this is for work that has not happened yet, or a new phase of work or a project that you've been working on, right? So this isn't for work that has already happened. This isn't a retroactive grant. This is for a vision that you have or a phase of a project you've been working on that's new. For the Art and Change grant, there are 2 deadlines. One is March 1st, which is clearly passed, and the other one is coming up on August 1st. And so it's the last public deadline we have open, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. In terms of what the application looks like, it looks like 6 questions that ask, what does your project look like? How does it engage community? Who are you and what's your motivation behind doing this work? But it also asks that you apply with what we call a change partner. And a change partner is someone that is a person or an organization or someone who can best support your work or project in some sort of way. And so you might be a visual artist, and maybe you'll be working with the fabric workshop as a venue to engage with people. Perhaps someone at the fabric workshop would be your change partner. Maybe you're a textile artist, and the only person who knows the specific textile work that you're doing is your auntie in Puerto Rico. Then maybe it's your auntie in Puerto Rico who is your change partner and can best support this work. Your change partner can be local, but they do not have to be local. And that is a common question that we often get. In terms of the other pieces of the application, we do not ask for a CV or resume. We ask for what's called an experience page. And in the experience page, you can definitely share the professional things that have led you to this point in your career for this project. But we're also really curious, and our panel's really curious about what are the personal things that have led you here and the political things that have led you to this moment, right? So you might be a media artist who has, accolades from your CV, but maybe you saw queer people in a documentary for the first time when you were 12 years old, and you remember being amazed that queer people were on your TV screen in your living room, right? That could have been a fundamental moment for you as an artist in your career. And we ask you to share those pieces and that vulnerability with our panel so that they can get to know you better and why you do this work. There are two big questions that are like threads through Leeway's work. And the first one is, how does the art create action around your social change intention? And so you might have racial justice or trans justice or immigration justice or indigenous sovereignty as your social change intent. How does the art actually create action around it? Not just for yourself, but for the community as well. And so how does that change ripple out? And how do you engage the community? So how's the art create action, and how do you engage local communities? In this picture on the left, you'll see some really amazing people. This is Andrea Palchik, Heidi Ratanovich, and Connie Yu. They actually applied as a collective for the Art and Change Grant, and they produced what they called Fortune, which was a double issue sort of release of their monthly zine. And then they also coupled it with a performance festival, which was drag multidisciplinary performances by local queer API folks. So that's a little bit about the Art and Change. Here's some more amazing grantees. You can see all our grantees on our website at www.leeway.org. You can actually search our grantee database by artistic discipline. You can search it by social change intent. You can search it by the year in which folks were granted. And so please play around with it. See who we funded before to get a sense of what's possible. And if you don't see something there, don't worry. It just means we haven't met you yet, right? And so it doesn't mean that it's a no. Sage Shankova is a visual artist, did some really beautiful media artwork about colorism in non-binary communities. Jasmine Rivera made some incredible videos with the Shut Down Burkes Coalition to end family detention. And Cynthia Dewey Oka is an amazing poet who gathered a group of poets together at Asian Arts Initiative to talk about displacement through poetry. The Transformation Award is the second public program we have, and that provides a $15,000 unrestricted award, and that's the best kind of award, y'all, which means you can just use it for whatever you need to use it for, right? You can pay your rent, you can buy your dog a new leash, you can do whatever you need to use it for to take care of yourself. Also supports women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists living in the Philadelphia area who have at least 5 years or more commitment to art for social change. That first deadline has passed. It's a two-stage process. That deadline hits every year on May 15th. And then the panel meets and invites up to 30 people back for stage 2. And in stage 2, it includes work samples and some additional questions. And then we announce who receives the Transformation Award in December at the end of the year. So it's a longer process. It's a two-stage process. And it is really situated for folks who have at least a 5-year commitment to their art for social change practice. When I talk about the Transformation Award, I really want to make space. Sometimes people hear 5 years or more and they immediately go to, I have to be an established artist. I have to have been doing this work for at least 30 years. And yes, it is for those folks too, but it's also for the 19-year-old poet who can prove that they've been doing their artwork since 14. Someone like Kavi Ade, who you see on your screen on the left there, who showed us that they were in their early 20s, but they had at least a decade of experience under their belt for their art and social change practice. Ria Tajiri's the artist in the middle, really talented media artist talking about sort of the Asian American experience, but so much more than that too, really thinking about healing and loss as it relates to communities. And then Mary Baxter on the right there is an amazing musician and visual artist, also known by her hip hop name as Isis the Savior. Really good music if you want to check it out, but she's really committed to ending mass incarceration, so particularly as a woman who was incarcerated before. Long story short, we're here to help you apply. I know that was like a very brief overview of what Leeway does, but we have information sessions throughout the year. We do applicant support sessions, which are one-on-one meetings with a Leeway staffer, where you can literally come to that meeting and say, I don't know, can you break this down for me? Or I've got these very specific questions. Can you help me navigate it? That link that you'll see here, which I'll also plop in the chat, will lead you directly to sort of an RSVP page where you can sign up for a one-on-one session. We've got a ton of them in July, right before the August deadline. And so if you want to meet and chat and get to know each other, we are here to help you very deeply. So I feel like that's all she wrote for me.
That was really great. We have one question. Would the Art and Change grant be available as a means to start a project that is looking to eventually expand or be part of a 501c3 at a later date?
That's a great question. And yes, we can help support you with that for sure. You know, what you do with your work after getting a Leeway grant is your journey to go on, right? And so Leeway artists have used a project to start their own 501c3 or for-profit. They've used their grants to create a product that becomes very profitable. So someone created a queer and trans tarot card deck and then went on to sell it, and it was very, very successful. We just give you the funds to incubate and start.
That was a great answer. Well, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for sharing your program. And I can't believe you announced on this program tonight the upcoming $25,000 award.
That's right. Only here at the CraftNOW panel.
Only here. Everybody better start showing up. Awesome. So we're gonna ask you to stick around in case there are any other questions and maybe watch the chat. And next we have Carrie with CERF Plus, which ironically, I had coffee with your colleague Cornelia right before the shutdown here in Philadelphia, February 2020. CERF Plus is a national organization, so they aren't just serving artists here in Philadelphia. They provide emergency relief grants, which this past year have shifted, I would say, a bit given the context, but they focus on materials-based craft and folk traditional artists that have incurred significant medical expenses related to the treatment and recovery of COVID-19 and/or experienced a recent career-threatening emergency such as an illness, accident, fire, or natural disaster, and the deadline is rolling. So Carrie, if you would share more about your grant program.
Yeah, thank you, Layla, for inviting CERF Plus and me to be here. And I will say I am more than mildly intimidated to go after Melissa and Cindy and those terrific presentations, but I'm really thrilled to be able to tell you more about CERF Plus and our work. So I am going to share my screen. And I am going to start off by just giving a little background about CERF Plus and who we are and what we do, and then we'll roll into the funding that we make available. So CERF Plus was founded in 1985 as a grassroots mutual aid organization by artists for artists, primarily by craft artists who found that they were always passing the hat for a peer at a craft show who had had a fire or a flood or an illness or an injury. And from that sort of analog crowdfunding beginning, grew into a formal national organization offering emergency relief for artists working in craft disciplines such as ceramics, wood, metals, fiber, and glass. And we've also grown throughout those years to support artists throughout all stages of their careers, in emergency or not, and work on a national level to strengthen the safety net for artists. And that's the plus in our work. And we strive to be a go-to for studio-based artists on readiness, with actionable information and education and resources to help artists be emergency ready. And then the other side, we also advocate for the needs of artists, working with both the general emergency management structure and also the federal government to ensure that their programs include artists and other self-employed workers. And as you can imagine, that's been a really ample part of our focus during this past year during COVID. And I want to give a quick sample of some of the other resources we have available, and then I'll really dive into the funding. So on the career protection, the non-funding side, we we have our Studio Protector, which is really just a kind of go-to hub on emergency readiness, emergency response, and emergency recovery. We also have a Crafting Your Legacy workbook, which aims to demystify the work of estate planning for artists and help break down the tasks into doable steps to help artists plan for the fate of their tools, equipment, materials, library, archives, and other art-making assets as part of creative legacy beyond the work itself. Our Cover Your A's program works with art school faculty to give them the tools and information that they need to incorporate that information into their curricula so that when artists start their careers, they're incorporating career resilience and emergency preparedness from go. We have a studio safety guide that breaks down the things to look for in a studio, from the building structure itself to electrical systems, hazmat, HVAC, overall safety, with the goal of giving artists the tool and empowerment that they need to either help them find a space or improve an existing space to safely make their art. We produced a series of videos with Wellness for Makers on caring for your body as an artist, because you are your most important tool and asset. And so the video series covers topics like neck and shoulder strain, standing in your studio, and conscious and sustainable studio habits. And then lastly, we have an insurance hub on our website, which provides artists with information to help them understand how best to insure their artistic practice and also connect with providers. And so that's just a little background on some of the other resources we provide beyond funding. So to move on to funding, that founding mission, our Craft Emergency Relief Fund, that's where the CERF comes, Craft Emergency Relief Fund. It provides emergency relief grants of $3,000 to artists working in craft disciplines across the United States and territories who've had some kind of career-threatening or serious emergency. We tend to act quickly, and we say that once we receive an application, determination will be made within 2 weeks. It's usually much faster than that. And we understand that if you've had a major career-threatening emergency, $3,000 won't necessarily make you whole, but it can bridge that gap between, say, an insurance payout, or if it's a natural disaster, federal disaster relief, or just other resources coming in. That's why we try to act really quickly there. And as an add-on to that assistance, we also have an in-kind program where we work with businesses around the country. Say, for example, if we've helped a ceramic artist and we have a relationship with a kiln manufacturer, and that manufacturer be willing to donate a kiln, making that connection between the two, so that the recovery for the artist is just that much more expedient. And also for the supplier working through us, they know that they're generally getting this kiln to someone who has had an emergency that they've already, that's someone known. So I'll talk a little bit more about eligibility and what we ask for in these applications. So the criteria are pretty simple and straightforward. Artists working in a craft discipline, you've had a recent career-threatening emergency, and you've resided in the US states and territories for the past 2 years. And the type of supporting documentation that we ask for in those applications, we ask for a resume, or we can also take a narrative of your work. It doesn't have to be formal if you're not, a kind of layout Word doc person, just some description of your practice and background as an artist. 5 images of your work. We do ask for tax forms because we want to show that there is a career that's being threatened by that emergency. However, we also support folk and traditional artists and cultural practitioners who aren't necessarily making an income from their work, and we do not ask for that in those circumstances. We don't want that to be a barrier. And then we also just ask for some kind of documentation of an emergency. If it was an illness, just something from a doctor, just something to verify. And it's not from an ethic of questioning the applicant, it's more just as stewards of our donors' funds on both sides, just verifying that we are supporting someone who has had an emergency. So then, as you can imagine, this fund was never set up to respond to something like the magnitude of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so in response, we created a dedicated COVID-19 grant. And like Leila said, our Standing Emergency Relief Fund is ongoing. This COVID-19 grant that we've offered has been run in 3 cycles to date, where we've awarded 888 grants totaling $888,000 to artists in 48 states, 3 territories, and Washington, D.C. These are $1,000 grants to address dire housing, medical, or food insecurity due to the pandemic. And we recognize that even as things are opening up, people still aren't necessarily whole. We are actively fundraising for a 4th cycle. And the criteria for this, because it is responding to a fraught situation, we are trying to make this as simple as possible. The criteria are the same as our emergency relief fund, pretty much. Just craft discipline reside in the US states and territories for the past 2 years. What we ask for here is just a narrative of your career, just so we can understand your practice as an artist in craft discipline, 5 images of your work, and then just to avoid kind of check boxes, the opportunity for artists to tell themselves, what they need, why they need support. And like I said, we are actively fundraising to do round 4. We are hoping to launch that late summer, probably August-ish. So if that is of interest to you, on every page of our website, cerfplus.org, at the bottom of the page, there's a Get Connected box. You can sign up to get our communications, and then you'll know when we relaunch this program. And so the last funding opportunity that we have, and the one that I personally oversee and love really dearly, is our Get Ready grant program. So all of our other funding is around emergency response. This funding is around emergency preparedness. And so this is grants of up to $500 to take some kind of career protection, studio safety, or emergency preparedness measure. And this can look like improving ventilation in your studio, instituting better documentation practices for your career, and maybe you need software to do that. Maybe you need better photography equipment, installing stronger security systems. We've received and funded grants from artists who work in precious metals and have real concerns about their security based on the value of the work that they use. And maybe they're open studios and they know that people know what they work in and they want really strong security in place. Also in making infrastructure changes to your studio to be more disaster ready. If you are in an area that's prone to flooding and you need to do things to your structure to divert water away, you can use the funding for that, or creating better systems for storing your work safely. We also, in our last round, pivoted to allow, or actually just expand really, to include the ways that artists are continuing to pivot in response to COVID, artists who are continuing to need to get their systems online and their sales online. They need assistance from web designers. They need assistance setting up websites. They need better photographs of their work and need professional photographers. And that likely continue into our next cycle. Our next cycle is contingent on the timing of the next COVID-19 relief cycle. So it'll likely be shortly on the heels of that, looking at probably early mid-fall. So again, I have to get our communications to know when this next Get Ready grant cycle comes up. And the criteria for this, the base is similar to our other grants, working in a craft discipline, United States and territories. And what we ask for with this grant, resume or narrative of your career, just understanding your practice as an artist, 5 images of your work, a really simple project description, up to 300 words. We're not asking you to write something really super long for this. And the budget for this, it's a text box in a form, really just list out your anticipated expenses. The thing that we note and also look for, if your project is going to go over the $500 cap, just note how you're planning to source that additional funding. And then the kind of unique facet of this project is we just ask that you share it out in some way to encourage or inspire other people to take, career protection or studio safety or emergency preparedness measures. So let us know if you have kind of an active social media presence and you'll share it there, or if you're a teacher and you'll pass on what you did to your students. Just what you plan to do to let others know what's possible, because I think emergency preparedness can sound kind of vague and like, what does that mean? And so just share what you did and hopefully maybe encourage other people to take some measures to help protect themselves. And so with that, that's our funding. So I'm going to stop share screen now, and thank you all so much.
It's really great. I'm sure a lot of people have appreciated the help getting their work online, especially this year for sales. That concludes our program. We can take a few more questions in the chat if anyone has one. I'm going to say and close that and let everyone know here you are invited to join us next week on June 3rd. We are hosting R & Company, New York City Gallery, and highlighting, my cat is talking, I don't know if you can hear her, and highlighting their current exhibition, Objects USA 2020, which hails a new generation of craftspeople by revisiting that groundbreaking show from 50 years ago. Evan Snyderman will be hosting, son of Philadelphia's renowned craft gallerists Ruth and Rick Snyderman, and he will be including interviews with artists Anna von Mertens and Jaden Moore. So registration is required for that. I'm going to drop the link in the chat and remind everybody to follow us on social media, CraftNOW PHL, and visit us on our website. So with that, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and say hello or ask questions or just say thank you and see you later.
Thank you so much. This is so helpful. Really appreciate all the help you guys bring to the table.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. We really appreciate it.
My chance to see everybody.
Thank you. It was very informative. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Good to see Jess. Thank you, Cindy, Melissa, and Carrie. Thank you, Rafa, for being here.
Of course.
So, before we sign off, I did notice in the chat there were a couple questions that I didn't quite answer.
Sure.
Is that all right? It looked like Daniel had a follow-up question about with the Velocity Fund artists that aren't primarily visual, like what would be some examples of projects? So we have a number of projects that are either performative, so some re-granting agencies, like if it's a theater or it's a play or it's dance, it's a good avenue for you to explain, like, oh, even though you might normally categorize this as dance, you know, these are the visually strong aspects that go into costume or lighting or set or documentation or video or projection that allows you to explain that in what might be in another category of traditional of arts. So that's sometimes an example, and other times, if people are working with social engagement, and we have a grantees who are working with land sovereignty. And so although what they're working with is education and planting, they're sharing that through a zine and through the design of that zine. So then that's their opportunity to explain what that might look like. And the follow-up question from Shaylee was about, is it all right to charge an audience members a ticket price? Absolutely. So that would be under income. And so again, that you can say how much you would need to cover the project and how much you might estimate would come from what you could expect from ticket sales, but then anything above and beyond that, as Melissa intimated with the Leeway Foundation, we are happy to support your project to its next life through that funding.
Well,
I think those were the last two that I saw lingering in the chat.
Cindy, I saw a project that the Velocity Fund funded that I was like, how is this visual arts? And it was the Beardmobile from the Bearded Ladies Cabaret. And then when I saw it, I was like, I get it now. I get it. Because I had assumed that they were performance-based, right? But I saw all the visual elements for the actual Beardmobile that drives around for the performance. So beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, I was at the Mother's Day performance, and Melissa brings up a really excellent example. Yeah, and for that proposal, we saw like mock-ups of what the Beardmobile as an object would look like, and also examples of what the performances, past performances, help tell that narrative too. So that's a wonderful example.
All right. Well, everybody has work to do. Applications to fill out. There's one due on Friday, one due June 14th, and then keep in touch with Leeway, and CERF is there when you need them. That is such a nice feeling. And I definitely want to circle back to CERF Plus. Jess and I are working on a project with Rafa to get some more information from you about emergency preparedness, because that is something artists don't often do.
Oh, let me nerd out on it. Please let me nerd out on it.
We'll save that for the next time. All right, everybody have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining CraftNOW, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Have a good night, y'all. Take care.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Take good care, y'all.